Hi everyone!
Hi Michael!
So, welcome to the 10 o'clock session. Kudos to all of you who were on call last night and are still awake and present. We appreciate you. Or like if you were just up because you can't fall asleep until 3 a.m. That's also very valid. Work on it, but valid. So welcome. I'm Michael. I'm the Midwest Director. I don't know my title. I'm the Residence Director on the Midwest Block.
You see this? Okay. I'm Weston. I'm the RD over in Conklin.
He's going to take it from here.
Yes, I will do that. So our goal today together, Michael and I were really interested in doing this session. As we all know, we're living in a season of some tense political movements as well as social movements, where it seems like there's extremes on everything that everyone talks about, right? It's hard to go through a day without hearing some very politically oriented, politically charged statement from someone around you, from yourself, from family, from friends, from residents, right? And as Michael and I were discussing, we've observed currently that we're in a culture of where when we hear these things that we may not agree with, we automatically move into, I need to respond, I need to defend, I need to say something, right? We've moved away from a place of listening to understand and listening to come together, and a place where we're talking to divide. And so we wanted to spend this time together today to really practice that ourselves of what does it truly mean to listen, so that when it comes to our residents, because our residents are also experiencing these things on a daily basis, how can we support them through these processes, be present for them, for residents that we may or may not agree with, but also how do we ensure that we're able to share how we feel to stay true to ourselves as well.
And I think it's similar to when you're dealing with situations involving students who are expressing suicide ideation or experiencing with sexual assault, where these are situations that are very emotional and very triggering, and you kind of need to know how your responses are going to work before going in to that situation with the resident, right? So it's kind of a similar situation with some of these topics. So first we're just going to lay some ground rules for what the session is going to look like. The first one is just like be ready to feel super uncomfortable. A lot of this stuff is really hard to talk about. For some of us it's super personal. I would say for probably all of us it's super personal. But like this is hard work, and it's good work that needs to be done. We're going to I'm trying to think. Me and Weston, the goal is to like let this be a very like loose session in which you have the opportunity to really share what you are feeling. Because we all, whether or not we agree with it or disagree with it, we all need to hear what people think. Because in order to have that conversation, we need to give a chance to listen to other people. So please feel free to say what you want to say. Weston and I are only going to intervene when like inflammatory language is used. So like if someone says faggot or the N-word, which I can say, we can have a conversation about that later. But like, you know, like that kind of like super derogatory, very clearly like socially understood, like inflammatory language, or any sort of language that threatens physical harm or safety. We will also have to intervene in the case of that. Well, we'll probably be calling campus security because I'm not intervening, but
I'm on call, so like I'll just do it.
There we go. So that's really the only time that we plan to like actually insert ourselves. Otherwise, we want and welcome kind of the uncooked thoughts, like just kind of verbally processing. The way that it's kind of gonna, and then what's said here stays here, what's learned here leaves here, and we're gonna have this conversation with the folks because you all are being recorded for the RAs who couldn't make it, so they can hear the session, and we'll have a conversation with them as well. So what that means is like what people say and who says what can just stay in here, right? The whole world doesn't need to know when we leave like Sonal said this about blah blah blah, right? You can say, hey, like someone brought this up and I learned about this. Like, do you get that difference where like the naming people and what they said, or maybe personal stories they tell, versus like what was the core of what they said and kind of taking the person out of that statement, right? Like that's how we can have these conversations so we can feel a little more comfortable having them. Basically today we have 5 statements. I don't know that we'll get to all 5, kind of see where the conversation takes us, but we'll have 5 statements, and Weston and I will read each statement, and we're gonna make arbitrary corners in the room. We're gonna have, if you strongly agree with the statement, you'll be over here. If you agree with the statement, you'll be in that back corner. If you disagree with the statement, you'll be in that back corner. If you strongly disagree with the statement, you'll be here. If you don't know where you stand or are neutral or don't feel comfortable, you can kind of stay in the middle. Again, the purpose of this is to really challenge yourself. We all and usually have like a gut reaction to a statement, right? Like we have a gut idea of where we land, and maybe that changes as you hear things, and that's fine too. But try not to stay in the neutral or nothing category for all 5 of them. And then also, between each position, we're gonna allow 30 seconds of like silence to just reflect. That way you're not, again, it's to encourage that like you're just taking a moment to and being present for while people in each position are talking. Does that make sense? So when we have folks in the strongly agree, if a couple people want to share, like there won't be any pause between the people within a group, but as we move from group to group, we'll have the 30 seconds of just kind of pause and reflection.
Awesome, so we'll go ahead and get started. Our first topic that we have a statement based on is abortion. The statement is the government should make abortion illegal in the United States. Strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree, neutral. Go ahead and move to your space. Okay, awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with the strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. You want to get started?
For me, it's more of a faith-based view. I'm Roman Catholic, and it's just the potentiality for life. No matter what, there is the potential, and you're robbing that potential. So that's my view.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and give 30 seconds of silence before we start the next position. Okay, we'll move to the agree side.
And this is more of a, as close to moderate as I'll get, leaning towards agree, because I do believe that it should be very regulated, that there should be instances where it should not be allowed at all. Now, not many people do it for the cosmetic reasons, but there is that motivation. There are needs when it's necessary, in case of life, in case of rape, in case of incest, and I believe that it should be offered, it should be safe, but it also shouldn't necessarily be incentivized through health insurance. It should be an operation offered by the state, performed and executed under heavy regulation, but it shouldn't be something that you can walk in and say, no, this really convenient for me. I just want to end a life. That's my position on it.
Thank you. We're going to take another 30 seconds. Okay. Disagree side.
Yeah, it's just me. While, like, I do believe that in most cases, like, it's morally wrong, I don't believe that that's something I want to make legally imposed on other people, and I think that there are a lot of other issues that should be addressed from a legal standpoint, like socioeconomic issues, a lot of things that contribute to, like sex education, abstinence only versus, contraception and birth control and all that stuff that I think I would want to focus on legally as opposed to just trying to outlaw abortion and then deal with the repercussions. I think that we have a lot of other things that need to be addressed before I'd feel anywhere near comfortable like saying that I think we should outlaw it.
Yeah.
I think kind of along with those lines, in an ideal world, in my head, like we wouldn't have abortion, but for me that's not a reality until women have the ability to decide when and where and how they have sex, and that's not a reality in our society right now, and so unfortunately like this has to be an option for women.
Yeah. I'm gonna disagree for very specific reasons, because personally I will never kill someone. I won't kill someone. That is my regulation I set for myself. But the question is talking about on a greater scale, on a political scale, for other people. So I've set that regulation for myself. It would be really selfish of me to set that regulation on everyone based on my own. Well, I feel it would be selfish if I put that on everyone. So I put myself at disagree instead of strongly disagree, because I have my bias where I don't want anyone to die ever. But I also don't think we should regulate it on a political level until we are all unless we're all socially at a place similar to where I am. If that makes any sense.
Okay, strongly disagree.
I'll go. Nobody else is gonna go. I think that there's just like this weird conception that people are like willy-nilly like, I'm gonna have sex and then like have an abortion. Woo! Like that's not how people think. And like you look at the stories and you hear people and they're like having an abortion was like the worst experience of their entire life. They're not just like, yeah, I'm gonna kill this baby. Like no, that's not how people think. And I think that that's a weird conception that we have as a society, that it's just like plan B, but there's like literally a pill called plan B. So like if your contraception doesn't work, like you know the condom broke, like you can go and like do those things. And I think that there's also a conception that like people just aren't using birth control and they're using abortion as plan B, and that's just like not the case. And I think that people have this weird faith that like birth control and condoms are 100% effective, and they're not. They're like clearly labeled that. And so I think that like if people are taking all of the necessary precautions and everything, like life happens, and it's not my place to be like, you're not allowed to do that. If like, and even if they didn't use contraception, it's not my place to say like, you're not allowed to do something with your body. And I think that like it's really interesting to watch, like to like see the like the rooms where people are making these decisions, and it's all men. And like even if there's just one woman, like how can like I get so frustrated because I'm like, it's not your body, and like you wouldn't even be carrying the baby. Like there's just so many different things that I just get so frustrated because I'm like, how can you have control? Like what if a bunch of women were sitting in a room and we're like, well, you're not allowed to ejaculate anymore, like sorry, like we're just gonna cut everything off. Like I just think it's so silly that like there's all of these like policies being thrown out, and it's not even with the people who are like fully like going through whatever it is.
All right. So our next statement is, all citizens should have access to government-sponsored universal health care. All right, so we'll begin with strongly agree.
I think, like, according to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, even, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that all carries with it, like, the need for healthcare. And sure, we can just say, oh, well, it's your responsibility to get your own healthcare, and that should be individually based. But in our society, when so much is tied to healthcare, when so much inequality is tied to healthcare, to access, I think it's not right for us to simply say, well, it's up to you if you get healthcare or not, because it's really not for a lot of people, especially when there's so many issues for people who try to get out of poverty. Like, if you're working paycheck to paycheck, you have no ability to get healthcare, and if something happens to you, you're going to be set back so far. And I believe that, like, if the American dream isn't something that's actionable now for a lot of poor people, then and they can't get to that healthcare, get to that healthcare, I don't think that's in line with what the U.S. stands for, what we stand for in a society that says it wants to be equal for all people.
Right, from the agree.
I agree with a lot of things that have already been said. I acknowledge that it's something that would be difficult to institute in our country just because of the way healthcare works now. A lot of people in our country are a little bit like, and people are entitled to healthcare, but I think people are sometimes a bit too entitled with like, sometimes people, and I mean, I've gotten some of this from like talking to doctors like that I know in my life, where it's like people want like an MRI for their knee, but it's like, even when the doctor's like, you don't really need an MRI, this is what we think is wrong, like we'll do that if physical therapy doesn't help, but there's not really a need to do it now. And so like things like that, where it's like people want things that aren't necessary, I think we would need to have sort of a shift so that to like respect doctors a bit more sometimes, with like acknowledging that they know what you need and what you don't need. But I definitely think that it's something that people should have. Like, people shouldn't not go to the doctor when they're sick because they don't know how they're going to pay for it. And you know, I think if this could help also like decrease the price of drugs, such as like cancer drugs, which I know can be like $100,000 for a year. I definitely think that would be a benefit too, because no one should have to pay that much just for a drug that's going to keep them alive, when I'm sure it doesn't cost that much to actually produce it, like the materials that go into it. There's a really high profit margin. So I definitely think it would be difficult, but I definitely think we need a change, because everyone deserves to not be worried about paying to make sure that they're healthy and that they stay alive.
Disagree?
For me, I would have to say that for a funding issue, as the government gets more and more involved with healthcare and more funding is shifted into those areas, I feel like science and technology progress is being robbed of those funds. So if we were able to, instead of shifting funds into the healthcare sector, shift funds into creating STEM programs and grants for kids who are going into the sciences, then maybe perhaps in the future we could see machines being built such as the ones you see like in the movies right now, like in Prometheus, like these, a machine that can fix almost anything, and perhaps make those extremely cheap so that everyone can have access to those. But right now, if you shift funds into healthcare, you're robbing future scientists of achieving that goal.
So we probably only have time for this last one. I think it's you all. We really appreciate your participation. We really, really do, and we thank you for that. So the last statement that we'll be working with on our time together today is the government should increase regulations around gun purchase and use, including the type of firearm being purchased and used. We'll go ahead and start with strongly agree.
So I'm from rural Nevada. My dad owns guns. A lot of my friends own guns. It's definitely a part of the culture. And I've heard the argument that we don't have a gun problem, we have a people problem, and I definitely agree with that. I think that we need better access to mental health care, and we need a culture that teaches gun safety if we're going to have so many guns. I think honestly at this point, like, it's unrealistic to get rid of all of the guns that are out in our country. But I do think that you should have to pass a background check to get a gun, and I think that that should be federalized so that you can't buy a gun from a gun show in one state and bring it back to another state. And I also just think that the amount of mass shootings that have happened in this country is ridiculous. And I haven't seen any progress from either side of like trying to resolve it, which is frustrating to me because I think it's not a partisan issue. It's like people are dying because of gun violence. I also know that Nevada has like the highest rate of women dying by guns because of the domestic violence issues in our state. So that's really important to me. It's important that if people are convicted of domestic violence, that they're not able to purchase a gun because that puts women's lives at risk. And so I do see both sides, and honestly, like, I am strongly agree that there should be regulations, but I also really wish that there was a way to do kind of a both and of like mental health and gun regulation, because I'm sick of hearing like condolences and prayers for this school and prayers for that school, because like if we're going to put America first, our people are dying because of guns, and I think it needs to be addressed.
Okay, agreed.
Traditional martial arts training starts with bare hand techniques, where you would practice those bare hand techniques, and then with a partner, you would do all the techniques to them, and then they would do them all to you. So you feel what it's like to be in both positions with those techniques. Then the next step up would be the staff, which is a rounded piece of wood. The Buddhists use it, and Buddhists are not violent people, generally speaking, so that's the next step. You practice those techniques and same setup. And then you slowly progress. And traditionally, the last weapon you would learn is the jiang, which is sword, right? Because it's one of the most deadly weapons that you can train. And that would be at the pinnacle of training. And theoretically at this point, you would have contemplated what it feels like to do these techniques and have them done to you, and it would allow you to be more compassionate when you're fighting. You want to end the fight as quick as possible and try and not kill the person. That being said, when you introduce more powerful weapons, like the gun, I mean, the around history of China, you know, gun power is created in China and then gets over to the West, they build these powerful weapons and they come back and suppress the Chinese. You have this really powerful weapon, which is more powerful than this sword, right? I think if you're going to add a new weapon, it should be implemented in that training. So first you start, again, with physical, where you're with someone, you're touching them, and then move up and up. Because it feels easier to kill someone with a gun, because it's less putting there. It's like in war, you just call the other side the pigs, you know, right? Those horrible people, but you don't actually know them. If you try and kill someone at a physical level with your hands, it's way more intense than shooting them from far away and you never see them. So as you build up and build up and build up and get to this highest, more powerful weapon, you should have a foundation of what it would feel like at a lower level, a more personal level, which can then make you respond in a different way when you're in those situations. So with that, because this traditional training method is more or less abandoned and rarely used, while it's ideal for me to say that we should all do this training method before anyone gets a gun, it's difficult, it's challenging. And if regulation would help that, put it off longer until people had more experience and figured out why and contemplating why they're getting the gun, how it would be used, if that would help that process, then I think that's a good thing.
Okay, disagree.
I pick disagree. The Constitution says we have the right to bear arms. My family owns guns, and like, I didn't necessarily grow up around them, but it's like kind of part of like our family. So, and I don't think it's a regulation issue on guns. I think it's more like an educational issue or like a healthcare issue. So, that should be the focus, like education of gun safety or like education about mental health and less about regulation of guns.
Do you have anything to add? Okay, gotcha. And then we'll just go ahead and move over to the strongly agree side based on time. Disagree, sorry. Oof.
Okay,
Disagree side.
so there was a school shooting a couple years ago. The assailant was a student, made it into the cafeteria, killed 4, wounded 5 others before a male cook was able to tackle the kid to the ground, disarm him, and the police arrived to arrest him. The issue of gun violence and higher regulations came up, and the state's representative spoke, and he said that if we have higher regulations for guns and the student who committed this act couldn't get his hands on a gun, he would have more than likely turned to YouTube to create a bomb, which is extremely easy. You can create a bomb out of any common household products, cleaning products. He would have created the bomb with more than likely, generally, those kind of bombs that are homemade generally have like a 30-yard radius, maybe. If he was able to smuggle that into the cafeteria and have it in his backpack and hide it under a lunch table at lunch, which is when the attack happened, instead of the 4 that were killed, the 3 others who were wounded, more than likely all 60 of the students in that cafeteria would have died, with the possibility of any students in the peripheral being hit by shrapnel, possibly losing limbs. So the point being made was, don't go after guns, because if you go after guns, people are just going to move to something else, possibly more destructive, such as homemade bombs. You have to go after the people, especially parenting. It's usually some sort of if they couldn't parent correctly, something like that. Mental health is an issue, but just going after guns is a pointless waste of resources and time, because they'll just move on to something else. So go after something else, possibly parenting, mental health, move on to a different avenue.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. We are definitely way past time, but we just want to thank you all for your participation. Genuinely, we do. Please sit in those feelings that you're feeling. Those feelings are valid, whatever those might be, and explore more of why you're feeling that way. And we are definitely here to help you process any way that you need. So thank you for participating. We
Yeah,
really
but like huge
appreciate it.
kudos to y'all.
Yes,
That's
thank
good.
you. Thank you.